You're about to discover 6 real cases that shocked the world, and trust me, each one will leave you with more questions than answers. Number 1. On February 24th, 1978, 5 men from Yuba City, California went to watch a basketball game. It was supposed to be a simple night out. None of them ever made it home alive. The 5 men were Gary Mathias, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, and Ted Wire. All were in their mid-20s and had mild intellectual disabilities. They were part of a local support program, but they were functional and independent. In fact, they had their own basketball team and were planning to compete in a Special Olympics tournament the very next day. That Friday night, they drove together to Chico, California, about 50 miles away, to watch a college basketball game. The game ended around 10 p.m. Witnesses saw them leaving the arena, but they never arrived home. When the men didn't return, their families contacted police. A search began immediately. 2 days later, on February 26th, authorities made a shocking discovery. The men's car, a 1969 Mercury Montego, was found abandoned on a remote mountain road near Rogers Cow Camp, more than 70 miles in the opposite direction from home. The car was stuck in snow on a narrow forestry road. But here's what made no sense. The road they were on wasn't on the route home. There was no reason for them to be there. The area was desolate, freezing, and dangerous in winter, and the car wasn't even damaged. Investigators examined the vehicle. The gas tank still had fuel. The engine was fine. There was no mechanical failure. The windows were rolled up. The doors were unlocked. Inside they found maps, candy wrappers, and a few personal items, but no sign of the 5 men. A massive search operation was launched. They scoured the mountains for weeks but found nothing. The snow was too deep, the terrain too vast. As winter turned to spring, hope faded. Then on June 4th, 1978, more than 3 months later, a group of motorcyclists exploring the area made a horrifying discovery. They found a small abandoned Forest Service trailer about 19 miles from where the car had been found. Inside they saw a body. It was Ted Wire. Ted's body was lying on a bed, wrapped in blankets, but the condition of his body told a deeply disturbing story. He had lost between 80 and 100 pounds. He had frostbite so severe that his feet were almost completely destroyed. Investigators determined he had been alive in that trailer for 8 to 13 weeks before he died of starvation and exposure. But here's what makes this case so intriguing. The trailer had food, canned goods, military rations, enough to last for months. There was a propane tank for heat, but Ted had barely touched any of it. He had eaten only a few scraps. The propane heater had never been turned on, even though matches were found nearby. Outside the trailer, searchers found more bodies. Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were discovered in the snow several miles away. Their bodies showed signs of hypothermia. Jack Hewitt's partial remains were found even further into the wilderness. His body had been scattered by animals. Gary Mathias was never found. To this day, his body has never been recovered. Investigators were left with impossible questions. Why did the men drive up that mountain road? Why did they abandon a working car? Why did Ted stay in the trailer for months without using the food or heat that could have saved his life? There were theories that suggested the men were either chased or threatened by someone, or they became disoriented and panicked. But till date, no evidence of foul play was ever found, no suspects or witnesses. The Yuba County 5 case remains one of America's most baffling disappearances, a mystery where every piece of evidence raises more questions than it answers. Number 2. On October 8, 2009, a family of 3 vanished without a trace in the remote mountains of Oklahoma. 4 years later, their remains were discovered, but the circumstances of their deaths are so strange that investigators still don't know what happened. Bobby Jamison, his wife Sherilyn, and their 6-year-old daughter Madison lived in Eufaula, Oklahoma. In October 2009, they were looking to buy land in the San Boys Mountains, a rugged and isolated area known for its dense forests and rough terrain. On October 8th, the family drove their pickup truck deep into the mountains to view a 40-acre plot of land. They never came home. When the Jamisons failed to return, family members reported them missing. A search began, but the mountains were vast and difficult to navigate. Days passed with no sign of them. Then, on October 16th, 2009, 8 days after they disappeared, hunters stumbled upon the Jamison family's truck. It was parked on a remote mountain road. The doors were unlocked, the keys were inside, and so was the family dog, still alive but malnourished. Police arrived and began investigating the vehicle. What they found inside made no sense. The truck was filled with the family's belongings. Sherilyn's purse was there. Bobby's wallet was there. Their cell phones, clothing, toys for Madison, everything. But that wasn't the strangest part. Investigators found $32,000 in cash stuffed inside a bank bag under the driver's seat. If this was a robbery, why was the money untouched? If the family had left voluntarily, why would they abandon everything, including their dog? Authorities checked security footage from the Jamison home taken days before the family disappeared. The footage showed Bobby and Sherilyn making dozens of trips back and forth between their house and the truck. They moved in a trance-like state, expressionless, not speaking to each other. Their movements were stiff, almost robotic. Friends and family were shown the footage. They said the behavior was completely out of character. A massive search operation was launched. They searched for weeks, but the family had vanished. Then, on November 16, 2013, more than 4 years later, hunters found human remains in the mountains, less than 3 miles from where the truck had been discovered. It was the Jamison family. Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison were found lying face down in the woods. Their bodies were so badly decomposed that the cause of death could not be determined. There were no bullet wounds or signs of blunt trauma, no definitive evidence of foul play, but investigators noticed something chilling. The bodies were found in a remote, heavily wooded area that had already been searched multiple times. How had search teams missed them for 4 years? And why were they lying face down, side by side, almost as if they had been positioned? Theories flooded in. Some believed the family was murdered by drug dealers. The area was known for illegal marijuana farms, and locals warned the Jamisons not to go there. Others believed Bobby, who reportedly suffered from severe depression, may have been involved in a murder-suicide. But there were problems with every theory. If it was murder, where was the evidence? If it was suicide, how did all 3 die with no visible injuries? Why was the money left behind? Why were they so far from the truck? The Jamison family case was officially closed as unexplained deaths. To this day, no one knows what happened in those mountains. If you're listening right now, these victims never got justice, but they can still be heard. Your subscription keeps their memory and voices alive, so hit that subscribe button now. Let's make sure they're never forgotten. Now let's continue. Number 3. On February 19, 2013, the body of a 21-year-old Canadian student was found inside a water tank on the roof of a hotel in Los Angeles. Her death was ruled accidental, but the final piece of footage captured before she disappeared is so disturbing that millions of people still believe something far darker happened. Elisa Lam was a student from Vancouver, Canada. In late January 2013, she traveled alone to California as part of a West Coast tour. On January 26th, she checked into the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. The Cecil Hotel had a dark history. Over the decades, it had been the site of multiple suicides, murders, and even housed serial killers. But it was cheap, and Elisa was traveling on a budget. For the first few days, Elisa stayed in touch with her parents. She called them regularly and posted on social media. She seemed to be enjoying her trip, but on January 31st, 2013, the calls stopped. Her parents couldn't reach her. Hotel staff noticed she hadn't checked out. Her belongings were still in her room. Elisa Lam had vanished. Police were called. They searched the hotel. They reviewed security footage. And then they found something that would become one of the most watched and analysed pieces of video in internet history. Elevator footage from the Cecil Hotel, recorded on the day Elisa disappeared. The video shows Elisa entering the elevator. She presses multiple buttons. The elevator doors stay open. She stands inside, waiting. Then she steps out into the hallway and looks both ways, as if checking to see if someone is there. She steps back into the elevator, presses more buttons. The doors still don't close. Then her behavior becomes strange. Elisa moves to the corner of the elevator and presses herself against the wall. She peeks out into the hallway again. Then she steps out completely and begins waving her arms in bizarre, jerky motions. Her hands move in fluid, almost dance-like gestures. She appears to be talking to someone, but no one is there. She steps back into the elevator one final time, waits, then walks out of frame. The elevator doors finally close. Elisa Lam is never seen again. Police released the footage to the public, hoping someone might recognize her behavior or have information. Instead, the video went viral. Millions of people watched it. Theories exploded online. Some believed Elisa was running from someone. Others thought she was playing a game or hiding. Many pointed to her hand gestures, claiming they resembled symptoms of a mental health crisis. Conspiracy theories ranged from paranormal activity to murder cover-ups. The search for Elisa continued. Weeks passed. Then on February 19, 2013, guests at the Cecil Hotel began complaining about the water. The pressure was low. The water tasted strange and it was discolored. Maintenance workers went to the roof to check the water tanks. There were 4 large tanks, each holding thousands of gallons. The workers climbed a ladder and opened the hatch to one of the tanks. Inside, they found Elisa Lam's body, floating face up. An autopsy was performed. Investigators found no signs of physical trauma, no evidence of sexual assault. Toxicology reports showed trace amounts of her prescription medications in her system, but nothing lethal. The coroner ruled her death as accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder listed as a significant contributing factor. But the circumstances raised disturbing questions. How did Elisa access the roof? The door to the roof was locked and alarmed. How did she climb the 10-foot ladder to reach the water tank? How did she remove the heavy lid, which required significant force? And how did the lid end up back on the tank after she was inside? Police concluded she must have climbed in herself during a mental health episode, and the lid somehow closed afterward. But many people found this explanation unsatisfying. The elevator footage haunted viewers. Was she hallucinating? Was she playing a game? Was someone there that the camera didn't capture? To this day, the death of Elisa Lam remains one of the most debated and mysterious cases in modern history. The footage still circulates online, the questions remain unanswered, and the Cecil Hotel, now rebranded, still stands in downtown Los Angeles. Number 4. In September 1944, while World War II raged across Europe and the Pacific, a small town in Illinois became the center of one of America's strangest and most debated mysteries. For 2 weeks, residents reported being attacked by a mysterious figure who sprayed paralyzing gas through their windows at night. But was the mad gasser real, or was it something else entirely? Mattoon, Illinois was a quiet town of fewer than 20,000 people. On the night of September 1st, 1944, a young mother named Aline Kearney was lying in bed reading when she noticed something strange. A sickly sweet odor began seeping into her bedroom. At first she thought it might be flowers from outside the window, but the smell grew stronger. And then she felt it. Her legs went numb. She couldn't move. Aline called out for help. Her sister, who was staying at the house, rushed in and also smelled the odor. It seemed to be coming from the bedroom window, which was open. Panicked, they contacted the police. When officers arrived, they found nothing. No evidence of a prowler. No explanation for the smell or the paralysis, which had worn off after about 30 minutes. But then Aline's husband, Bert, came home from his taxi route around 12:30 a.m. He saw a tall man dressed in dark clothing lurking near the bedroom window. The man was wearing a tight-fitting cap. Bert chased after him, but the prowler vanished into the darkness. The next day, September 2nd, the local newspaper, the Mattoon Journal-Gazette, ran a front-page story. The headline read, "Anesthetic Prowler on Loose." The subheading declared, "Mrs. Kearney and daughter first victims." By using the word first, the newspaper seemed to predict what would happen next. More attacks were reported. Lots of them. Over the following days, dozens of residents came forward claiming they had experienced similar incidents. They described the same sickly sweet smell, the same temporary paralysis. Some reported nausea, vomiting, and difficulty breathing. Others said they saw a dark figure fleeing from their property. By September 5th, the police had received reports of 4 more gas attacks in a single day. That night, Carl and Beulah Cordes returned home late to find a white cloth lying on their porch. Beulah picked it up and smelled it. Immediately, she felt nauseated and lightheaded. She described it as feeling like a charge of electricity going through her body. A burning sensation spread through her throat. Some reports claim she began bleeding from her mouth. The cloth was taken as evidence, but when analysed, investigators found nothing unusual. By September 10th, panic had gripped Mattoon. Armed citizens patrolled the streets at night, shotguns and pistols in hand. Farmers from surrounding areas joined the patrols. Women carried bats and clubs whenever they left their homes. People refused to sleep alone. The FBI was called in. State police arrived. Chemical weapons experts from the army were brought in to investigate, but no one could find the mad gasser. Then, on September 12th, the police chief made a shocking announcement. According to his investigation, there was no prowler. The so-called gas attacks were likely caused by fumes from the Atlas Diesel Engine Company, a local factory that used carbon tetrachloride, a chemical with a sweet smell that could cause the reported symptoms. The factory immediately denied this, stating that their employees had never reported any illness from fumes. The police chief then changed his explanation. He declared that the entire affair was mass hysteria. The attacks were imagined. The prowler was a figment of collective panic fueled by wartime anxiety and sensational newspaper coverage. After the announcement, reports of gas attacks stopped almost immediately. But was it really mass hysteria? Skeptics pointed to real evidence. The cloth found on the Cordes' porch, multiple witnesses who saw a prowler, physical symptoms that were consistent across dozens of reports, the fact that some victims were men, not just anxious women as the mass hysteria theory suggested. In 2003, a local high school science teacher named Scott Maruna published a book challenging the official explanation. He argued that a real person was responsible for the attacks. Maruna pointed to a local man named Farley Llewellyn, a chemistry genius who kept a secret laboratory, experimented with chemicals, and had once caused an explosion that rocked his neighborhood. But Llewellyn was never charged. No definitive proof was ever found. To this day, the mad gasser of Mattoon remains unsolved. Before we move on to the next case, to help ensure that stories like these continue to reach people like you who care about them, please hit the like button and don't forget that your subscription means that these cases will never be forgotten. Now that you've done that, let's continue. Number 5. On the evening of March 31st, 1922, 6 people were brutally murdered on a remote farmstead in Bavaria, Germany. The killer was never found. But what makes this case truly terrifying isn't just the violence, it's what happened afterward. Hinterkaifeck was a small farm located about 70 kilometers north of Munich, nestled between the Bavarian towns of Ingolstadt and Schrobenhausen. The name means behind Kaifeck, referring to its isolated location behind the tiny hamlet of Kaifeck. The farm was home to 6 people: Andreas Gruber, 63, the head of the household, his wife Cecilia, 72, their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, 35, Victoria's 2 children, 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Joseph, and their new maid Maria Baumgartner, 44. The family was known for keeping to themselves. Neighbours rarely saw them. They were private, distant, and some whispered that something strange was happening on that farm. They had no idea how right they were. In the months before the murders, disturbing things began happening at Hinterkaifeck. The family's previous maid had quit 6 months earlier, claiming the farmhouse was haunted. She said she heard footsteps in the attic at night, even though no one was there. Then, in late March, Andreas Gruber found a newspaper from Munich lying on the property. He had no memory of buying it. No one in the family subscribed to that paper. He asked the neighbours. None of them had ordered it either. How did it get there? A few days before the murders, Andreas made an even more chilling discovery. After a fresh snowfall, he found footprints in the snow leading from the forest toward the farm's machine room. The lock on that door had been broken for weeks, and Andreas had never bothered to fix it. But here's what terrified him. The footprints led to the farm, but none led back to the forest. Andreas searched the machine room, the barn, and the house. He found nothing. But that night the family heard footsteps in the attic. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Andreas went to investigate. The attic was empty. Despite these warnings, Andreas never contacted the police. He mentioned the strange occurrences to neighbours, but when they offered help, he refused. On the afternoon of March 31st, 1922, the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived at Hinterkaifeck. Her sister escorted her to the farm and then left. She was likely the last person to see the family alive. That evening, all 6 residents of Hinterkaifeck were murdered. On April 1st, neighbours noticed that young Cecilia hadn't shown up for school. The family, who were usually seen at church every Sunday, didn't attend services. Mail began piling up. No one answered the door. By April 4th, concerned neighbours contacted the police. When investigators arrived and entered the farmstead, they discovered a scene of unimaginable horror. In the barn, they found 4 bodies stacked on top of each other, covered with hay. Andreas, his wife Cecilia, their daughter Victoria, and 7-year-old Cecilia. All had been beaten to death with a mattock, a farming tool similar to a pickaxe. Inside the house, they found 2 more bodies. 2-year-old Joseph, killed in his crib, and Maria Baumgartner, murdered in her bedroom on her first day of work. The autopsy revealed devastating details. All 6 victims had been struck multiple times in the head. Their skulls were shattered, their faces were unrecognizable. But one detail was more horrifying than all the rest. The 7-year-old girl, Kazilia, had survived the initial attack. She lay in the barn, alive, for hours. Investigators found clumps of her own hair clutched in her hands. She had torn it out in terror or pain before finally dying. And then there was the other discovery. Someone had been living at the farm after the murders. The cattle had been fed. Meals had been prepared in the kitchen. Smoke had been seen rising from the chimney over the weekend. Someone had slept in the beds. Someone had eaten the food. The killer had stayed at Hinterkaifeck for 3 days, living among the corpses. Investigators launched a massive investigation. Over 100 suspects were questioned. The previous maid, neighbors, a man named Lorenz Schlittenbauer, who some believed was the father of Victoria's youngest child. Even Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel, who had reportedly been killed in World War I, but whose body was never recovered. But no one was ever charged. In 1923, the farmstead was demolished to prevent it from becoming a site of morbid curiosity. During the demolition, workers found the murder weapon, the mattock, hidden in the barn. The victims' heads had been removed and sent to Munich for forensic analysis. But during the chaos of World War II, the skulls were lost. The bodies, without their heads, were buried in a local cemetery. To this day, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved. Number 6. In August 1993, a group of experienced hikers set out on a trek through the Khama-Daban mountain range in southern Siberia, Russia, and only one person returned alive. The group consisted of 7 people, led by a woman named Lyudmila Korovina, an experienced hiker and instructor. The others were young students and outdoor enthusiasts. They were well equipped and familiar with the terrain. The trek was supposed to last about 2 weeks, a routine expedition through a remote but well-traveled route. On August 17, 1993, the group set up camp near a mountain pass. The weather was clear, spirits were high. According to the sole survivor, a woman named Valentina Utachenko, everything seemed normal. But that night, everything changed. Valentina later described what happened in fragmented, terrified recollections. She said the group was sitting around the campfire when one member suddenly began screaming. The person clutched their head, screaming about unbearable pain. Then another person started screaming, then another. Within minutes, all members of the group except Valentina were writhing on the ground, screaming, clawing at their faces and bodies. Some were laughing hysterically, others were crying. Blood poured from their noses, mouths, and ears. Valentina said she tried to help them, but she didn't know what to do. She watched in horror as, one by one, her friends convulsed and died. By morning, 6 people were dead. Valentina was the only survivor. Freezing, traumatized, and alone, Valentina stumbled through the wilderness for days. She eventually reached a remote village and collapsed. Locals took her in and contacted authorities. When rescuers arrived at the campsite, they found the bodies. The scene was nightmarish. The victims' faces were twisted in agony. Blood had dried around their noses and mouths. Their skin showed signs of chemical burns or frostbite, though the weather had been mild. Autopsies were performed, but the results were inconclusive. The official cause of death was listed as hypothermia, but this explanation raised immediate questions. The temperature hadn't dropped low enough to cause hypothermia, and hypothermia doesn't cause screaming, bleeding from the face, or simultaneous death. Theories have circulated for decades. Some believe the group was exposed to a toxic gas leak from underground volcanic activity. Others suggest they ingested contaminated food or water. Paranormal enthusiasts point to the similar Dyatlov Pass incident from 1959, also in Russia, where 9 hikers died under mysterious circumstances. But Valentina's testimony remains the most disturbing aspect of the case. She insists her friends died in agony, screaming, bleeding, and laughing all at once. She has never wavered from her story, though some investigators believe her account may have been distorted by trauma and hypothermia. To this day, the Khama-Daban incident remains unsolved. So what do you think about these events? If you found them as unsettling as I did, let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you know of any other mysteries that deserve to be told, share them below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy videos like this. I'll see you in the next episode of The Mystic Explainer.